Hey folks, welcome to a very spooky and some would say colorful edition of the Processing Blue podcast. I am Panthers beat reporter / green crayon Mike Kaye. I'm joined by a Patch Adams looking Alex Zietlow, who is also a Panthers beat reporter, you might have heard. So, you might have also heard that there was a trade on Tuesday.
Mike, your segues are amazing. This is just remarkable.
Thanks, Alex. You totally interfered with it, but I appreciate it anyway. Alex, let's not waste any time, just like the Panthers didn't waste any time trying to trade away Diontae Johnson a week before the trade deadline. First conclusion to jump to, they couldn't wait to get him out of the door. I'm sorry, that's what that trade says. Period. There is no way around that. I don't care what they say publicly. When you trade Diontae Johnson, your top wide receiver, and a 2025 sixth-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens, where he's presumably going to be the third or fourth wide receiver, which speaks to your talent level on the Panthers, for a 2025 fifth-round pick, you're trading a guy to trade him. You're basically releasing him with a side of value. It's basically like acquiring a Happy Meal with just the small fries in there. Because essentially what these small fries are a jump of 10 to 15 picks in a round because on day 3, because essentially the Ravens are Super Bowl contenders, the Panthers are number 1 overall pick contenders, and they just traded a guy who still leads them in catches, still leads them in yardage, and still leads them in, and is tied for the lead in receiving touchdowns, This was a guy who just 2 weeks ago quit on a post route, which caused an interception. I mean, he also screwed up on another route that caused another interception against the Chargers. This is just like a means to an end, essentially. The Panthers, in retrospect, traded 7 games or acquired 7 games of Diontae Johnson, a 5th-round pick in 2025, and a 7th-round pick in 2026 for Diontae Jackson and 2 6th-round picks. Okay. I mean,
there's so many different ways that you can do the calculus on it. At the end of the day, it's I don't know. I don't know exactly how you feel about this, Mike, but it just feels unsatisfactory for the.
I mean, Alex, it's at best a wash, at worst a swindling, and probably in reality, it's like a massive shoulder shrug because you were like, wow, that initial trade was like a no-brainer because you're basically trading a 6th-round pick for Diontae Johnson and getting a 7th for a guy who's about to be cut in Diontae Jackson. Like, that's really what that trade was. It was 2 separate trades in one. And Diontae Jackson was about to be released, and then they reworked his contract. The trade was a no-brainer. And it's tough to say the trade didn't work out either, because it's like you got 7 games of a guy who played like a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver, but clearly there was something there, right? I mean, I think it was abundantly clear that he and Bryce Young, at least on the field, were not seeing eye to eye. Their timing wasn't there. I mean, I really don't know what else to say. I mean,
yeah,
the value for him is ridiculous. I was told last week, late last week, I think it was Friday, that the initial asking price for him was a 3rd-round pick, according to a league source. I was told this morning that price had dropped exponentially. I didn't realize it was that exponential. I thought it was like maybe like Diontae Johnson potentially for like a 5th by itself or a 6th by itself. This wasn't even that. This was like a move up of like, potentially just 1 pick. If the Panthers finish in last place and the Ravens win a Super Bowl, they move up 1 pick.
I know.
Yes,
I know.
Ridiculous. I'm a giant green crayon criticizing an NFL trade. But listen, Patch Adams, what type of patchwork into this future of draft picks is this trade really?
So I think the most generous reading of this trade is this. The Panthers were not going to re-sign Diontae Johnson next year.
Obviously, yeah.
Clearly. therefore they were going to be active in free agency this fall, and they're this spring, and they were going to, they're going to be so active that they're probably not going to get that compensatory pick that Johnson's departure would have otherwise given him. For those who don't know, if a player leaves your team in free agency, you may receive what the NFL calls a comp draft pick. In other words, you're getting compensation for that player leaving. The Panthers are saying, hey, like, we're going to secure a draft pick now, however low that is, and whatever we have to attach to Diontae in this trade to get that draft pick, so Diontae doesn't just walk with nothing at the end of the year. The team is also saving some minimal money in the cap. Mike, you're more fluent in the salary cap, so I'll let you talk about that. But
I mean, that's all pretty negligible. They're reportedly paying a good portion of his salary. I haven't confirmed that yet, but if the reports are true that they're paying roughly $3 million of his contract, I mean, they're really not saving that much money either. Yeah. Like, this was done before a major problem. I mean, that's how this reads.
Yes, and that is, and who knows? Maybe a major problem was coming. The thing that I'm racking my brain about is, like, and I haven't done because the news just broke. I haven't done adequate research on it yet. But who will the Panthers get to replace Diontae Johnson's production? Do you bank on the guys you already have? Yes, Jalen Coker's coming up a little bit. Jonathan Mingo has not played up to his second round ability. Xavier Legette has flashed this year. Do you go and get one of the several undrafted unrestricted free agents in 2025 that are going to hit the free agent market in March? Among those guys, Tyler Lockett, guy that Dave Canales coached while he was in Seattle. Of course, he's 32 years old. There, Robert Woods, another veteran for the Texans. There, like, if you look at overthecap.com, there are a ton of unrestricted free agent wide receivers come 2025.
But they're all older than you are. So
they're all old with the exception of a couple. You know, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, is 27. Nelson Aguilar, oh well, he's 31. I mean, like, yeah, you're right. They're all pretty old.
Yeah, I mean, I might just be a green crayon, but I think, I do think it depends on what they do with Legette and Coker moving forward. I also think it depends on what they want to do at quarterback. If they go for a veteran quarterback in free agency or in a trade, maybe they don't spend as much on wide receiver and they focus more on the defense, which has been a clear issue. But we got a preview of what the wide receiver group is going to look like from now on, at least the rest of the season, in a blowout loss to the Broncos. So let's transition to that. I think you and I both agree this trade value is a big, you know what I mean? And if you're not watching the video of this, I just shrugged in a big way. I think, look, the optics are bad. The reality is probably worse. And listen, here's the thing. I've said this to you several times. Whenever national talking heads bring this up, or I get a bunch of emails about fire sales always sound great until you realize why there's a fire sale. It's because you don't have talent. And when you trade talent that is very mediocre, other evaluators see that, believe it or not, and they're going to offer up limited returns. It's the same reason, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, it's the same reason why I think trading Bryce Young at the deadline puts you at a disadvantage in negotiating. I mean, I'm still getting tweets even after this trade. It's like, well, why shouldn't we have a fire sale? Well, fellas, ladies, the issue is while you want to trade guys, and the presumption is you're going to get value for them, trading some guys for a 7th round pick or to move up in rounds or do stuff like that isn't necessarily worth it when you have to field a team for the next 9 games. And I get it. You want to bottom out. You want to tank for number one. Guess what? The talent on this team is enough to get you there.
Hey, man, yeah, exactly.
I don't really think you need to trade anyone away to make
sure. You ain't got to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, look,
I promise you.
Look, all joking aside, the Titans and the Giants are terrible. The Saints have not played well. Panthers also play the Saints and the Giants in the next 2 weeks. So there's a chance that affects who's at the top as well. But like, the reality is the Panthers are cruising towards the top 5 pick. I think they know it. I think it's important to maintain culture for whatever that's worth right now. And clearly they wanted Diontae Johnson out. That is, I mean, there's no other way to read that trade because Baltimore offered basically nothing for him. They didn't even get a pick for player. This was a pick swap for player, and the pick swap was literally like second half of the 5th round for first half of the 6th round. Like, that's math, kids. I know I'm just a crayon. I know. And I know this looks ridiculous if you're watching this on video, but this is a very, very, very spooky, spectacular version of the Processing Blue podcast. And let's get into the latest spooky loss in Denver. It was another dud, my friends. So I went to the Mile High City for like less than 24 hours. And, you know, it was probably a better trip for me than it was for the Panthers. This was another blowout loss in a string of blowout losses. Mm-hmm. The only difference was Bryce Young was at quarterback. Josie Jewell, A'Shawn Robinson, and Jadeveon Clowney played. Mm-hmm. There were some signs of good, but for the most part, I think there's going to be a lot of polarization because of the stat watching of this game. The first drive of the game, on defense, they get a forced fumble and a recovery by Shai Tuttle, who has had a miserable season. Then they go 49 yards to score an opening drive touchdown, the first of Bryce Young's career and the first touchdown pass of the season for him. Everything's looking like gravy. And then, well, the Broncos scored 28 straight points. And, you know, we got into checkdown mode. I mean, we really saw just like every version of a checkdown you possibly can have. I think Miles Sanders had like the first handful, had like half of the first half catches for like 30-something yards. It was rough, man. And I think a lot of blame falls on Dave Canales. I don't want to completely move away from Bryce Young here, but it just kind of feels like if you're not going to trust Bryce Young, why even play him? And I know somebody at home is going to be like, well, your other option was Jack Plummer. But yeah, all that dude does is throw down field. And look, I understand they're in a tough spot. Dave Canales didn't draft Bryce Young. He wasn't the guy who handpicked him. Neither did the front office. He played terribly his first 2 games. But like following that first drive, it should have been time to open up the playbook and instill some more confidence in him. And look, I gave him a D. We did a grades. We normally do grades on the entire team. This time we focused on Bryce Young because that was really the story. And I felt like he played like a D- player until that final drive where they were going up against prevent defense, and then he just let it rip. And I just like, I think there's a mentality issue, a confidence issue. I don't know what to make of it. Alex, you were sitting at home. You got the replays. What's your take on this in Denver?
I mean, kind of like what you said. It's deja vu all over again. Word to Yogi Berra. Word to maybe Olivia Rodrigo. It's the same story every week. One thing that to build off of one thing that you said about the play calling being, or the offense feeling a little timid with Bryce Young being at quarterback. I don't know how much of that is a play calling issue. I mean, Andy Dalton doesn't have these problems. Andy Dalton is like uber aggressive as a quarterback. At least he has been. Yeah. It is not uncommon for Andy to throw questionable balls for Diontae Johnson to go up and get.
He's an gunslinger. That's his mentality. So play calling would adapt to that. So here, let's just get into it. Following the game, I don't mean to cut you off, but following the game, I literally asked Dave Canales, why does this offense look so timid with Bryce Young behind the wheel? And he said, you try to get him plays that he's comfortable with early. I do think it's a mix of how, good coaches adapt to what guys are comfortable with. I don't think that's the criticism. I think the criticism is you're not evolving over that comfort. And so that's why I'm criticized. Does that make sense?
No, it does, but I just feel like there's just a lot of blame dodging when it comes to Bryce Young's performances, and this has been a thing since his rookie season, really.
True.
I mean,
no, that's 100% correct.
And it also goes to the operational issues the offense had. The offense on one drive had 2 delay of games in 3 plays.
They should have 4.
And in 3 plays, the final drive right before the first half, all they had to do was run the ball out and keep the score attainable by halftime because they were getting the ball back, or they should have pressed the ball downfield and used and flex their 2-minute offense. Instead, no time runs off the clock, and the Broncos have a chance to extend the lead even further. They ultimately didn't end up doing that, but
But Dr. Clown, isn't that on play calling?
No, because I was talking about the operational issues. I was talking about the operational issues at the end of the first half and also throughout the game. That doesn't happen with Andy Dalton, I don't think. I mean, it's hard to call up specific examples. I mean, sure, does they...
So here's the thing to me. Operational issues are similar to technique issues. That's coaching. I mean, you can also give the fair share of blame to players, but if you're not associating operation with coaching and timing, then I don't know really what to tell you. I just think they did have operational issues with Andy Dalton. There were operational problems with him the last couple of weeks. And I'm not making excuses for Bryce. I thought Bryce was ultimately mediocre. But I do think Dave Canales deserves some criticism here for how the plays were coming out, how they were managing the clock, how guys were prepared to line up. These are all elementary things.
Okay, but do you think? Sorry, do you think genuinely that on a 3rd and 12 in the third quarter, within your own 20-yard line, Dave Canales is calling a play where the first option is a drag route to Miles Sanders for 3 yards?
No, I don't. But I think from an operational standpoint and from a flow of the game calling standpoint, there's so much influence from Canales there. You don't get to be the judge, jury, and executioner of this team and this offense without taking some sort of blame for that.
I understand.
You know what? He wanted to be the quarterback's coach. He wanted to be the offensive coordinator. He wanted to be the head coach. He wanted to be the rally cry guy. He wanted to, he's got 97 jobs when he was an OC for 1 year. The reality of the situation is he's learning on the fly, but that doesn't exclude him from criticism. I think the folks that still believe in Bryce Young and still think he can operate have a valid excuse to say, listen, you've put this guy with a guy who's learning how to do the job on the job. That doesn't take away any warranted criticism. It's the reality of the situation. I think for what it's worth, Canales has had some play calling quirks. There have been times where he's looked brilliant and they just haven't executed. But there's also been times where I do kind of feel like more often than not, there are a lot of guys in the same target zone. That shouldn't be happening. It does kind of feel like there's miscommunications a lot. That's all in preparation. And I think Dave Canales has done a good job of taking the blame for that, whether it's public lip service or whatever. I think that's valid. Now, talking about Bryce, look, this has been an extended segment. I'm sure that Zach is horrified because he is a Halloween edition of the podcast. When you come out of this game, I know what you're going to say, but is the answer now, I know you don't think that he is an upgrade over Andy Dalton. Neither do I. Anybody with actual eyes probably feels that way. But are you at the point where it's time to trade him at the deadline, or are you being logical and saying, hey, you're probably going to get more for him in the offseason. I feel like I've influenced your answer, but
yeah, no,
I think you really have to look at this cut and dry. What do you think?
Yeah, no, you don't trade him before the November 5 deadline. I don't know what you could possibly get for him. I don't know what that does when it comes to destabilizing. I don't see the benefit of it virtually. Also, forgive me if this is incorrect, but you rarely see teams do that, trading away a quarterback in the middle of the season, particularly one that held so many hopes and dreams for you at one point. I mean, even Mac Jones for the Patriots last year played the rest of the year, I can't remember if he got benched the final couple games, but they ultimately dealt him to Jacksonville afterward. So you hold on to Bryce and you wait for the NFL machine to do their magic of manufacturing hope around a whole bunch of different players, and then I think you ultimately find a new home for him. I know that we've said this so many times, but like, what we know is that he hasn't played well. Through 19 starts, he's 2-17, 0-3 with Dave Canales, the coach who was supposed to unlock him, and instead he benched him. He's regressed from year one to year two. He's someone who's impossible not to root for. He's got a great family. He's never gets too high, never gets too low, something that these coaches and these front office personnel are really magnetized by. This is not, if he's the starting quarterback or if he's part of the Panthers' offense next year, I don't know. I don't see the vision. I just don't. And just real quick, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because a lot of friends and people and Panthers fans who have been hitting me about and asking me about what I think the Panthers should do with Bryce Young, they're very quick to say, no, like, keep him in so his trade value can increase by the end of the season, which, okay, that's something. But then they also say, oh, it's not a terrible thing that the Panthers keep losing. It's not. It'll improve their draft position. And my response is that, guys, the Panthers aren't winning their way out of a top 4 spot anyway. They're just not. This back half of the schedule is brutal for any team, particularly with the Panthers defense that's beat up as it is, who is making rookie quarterbacks look like first ballot Hall of Famers week in, week out. This is play someone, and again, we might disagree on this based on our first segment, but play someone who can carry out Canales' play calling, who doesn't have the same operational issues that Young has, who has shown, at least in one game, and really multiple games, but truly in one game, that this offense has some life. Find some progress somewhere, and then spend the rest of the year restoring hope for next season, because the hope isn't going to come in a new general manager. The hope's not going to come in a new executive vice president of football operations this year. Hope's not going to come in a new head coach. Dave Canales signed a 6-year contract with the Panthers prior to this year. This is David Tepper's guy for the long haul. So find a way to restore hope with the guys you have now and move on with Bryce next year. That's how I feel about it.
All right, cool. Well, now that we're 15 minutes into this thing, I did promise a special Halloween edition. So we've got some Halloween themed segments that we're gonna blitz through. What is the scariest part of this 1-7 start? What do you got, Alex?
I kind of already said mine, but yeah, it's Bryce. It's the Bryce Young situation. What do you do with him? And like, the season did not go as anyone expected. The last 2 years have not gone as anyone expected with this quarterback. Again, he's very easy to root for because he is a good person and he is a thoughtful person, and he dazzled in Alabama, and it's so confounding. And we hear reports every single week of reporters talking to an anonymous coach in college being like, I don't know what the Panthers are doing with him. But it's just spooky. It's like literally what has happened with the Bryce Young situation here is spooky. I don't know where to cast the blame, but it's just nuts. So that's my most spooky thing. What's yours, Mike?
I'm going to go with Ejiro Evero's defense. I mean, at least with Bryce, we saw that he was pretty mediocre last year. the Panthers' pass defense last year was terrific. They get rid of Frankie Luvu. They get rid of Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin-Leeds, who barely played last year. They've gone through a ton of injuries. Like, this is just bad. They couldn't stop the run to save their lives, and last year they were terrible against the run. They did improve against Denver. They held them to 102 rushing yards, but I also think that's partially because Sean Payton kept trying to run up the score and throw the ball down the field. So,
yeah, we didn't even talk about that in the.
Well, here, I'm going to say this. If I were game planning to play the Panthers, I would say I'm going to commit to the run of 30 times a game. I'm going to run crossers against safeties and linebackers and slot corners with my slot receivers and tight ends and running backs. They cannot cover crossers. And it was abundantly clear as Adam Troutman was just running free throughout the game.
On National Tight End Day, dude.
Yeah, well, sometimes you got to live a little. But yeah, that's what I would say. I would say Evero's defense, I mean, he's gone from a surefire soon-to-be head coach to, hey, you've got to explain, like, what happened here. Like, it's almost like, I still think he's a very good coach. I still think he's a very good coordinator. It's just, like, the injury bug, the lack of talent, it's been like a concoction of terribleness in a similar way to the offense last year. And I just think, like, that's been rough. The Panthers have not done a lot to help other people's careers. All right, let's get to our next segment. The monsters of the midway point. So let's name each of our, let's start with offense, but here, who is the best player on offense? I mean, I know who you're going to say, but who is the best player on offense through the first half of the season?
You don't know who I'm going to say.
No, okay.
You probably do. It's Chuba Hubbard. But dude's outside Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt in that interior offensive line that keeps putting up numbers every week and keeps grading out well every week, Chuba's probably among one or two of the monsters on this team. I don't know what else we can say about him. Just some stats. 593 rushing yards through the halfway point of the season. He should easily crest that 1,000-yard season number. He's toting the ball 15 to 18 times a game, which is pretty good and is pretty expected considering he's on a contract year, as we've talked about so many times. I mean, he's playing so well that Canales has to scheme touches for Miles Sanders. He hasn't even handed the ball off to Raheem Blackshear, who is running back number 3, one time this year. I don't know what they're going to do when Jonathan Brooks gets activated, honestly. When
I feel like I have a good idea.
Well, yeah, and you can talk about that, but like this is like one of the few good problems that the Panthers have right now. They don't really have a lot going good. The only things that they have going good also result in problems of the good variety, which is interesting. But I mean, and then on top of everything else, Chuba Hubbard's the guy. When you asked the players and the coaches yesterday about who's the leader in the locker room, everyone pointed to Chuba. I mean, he's the guy. He's the number one monster on the team.
Yeah, this is bad radio or bad podcasting, but I think he is really the Adam Thielen of this season, where it's like you can't really point to anyone else. He is the guy. I was hyping him up all off season. I tried to tell everybody this was the Chuba Express this year, and it's come down the tracks and looked really pretty consistently good. Even his bad games, he's contributing pretty well. Like, this offensive line deserves a lot of credit too, but I think that's a unit that's being successful. And Robert Hunt would be my other guy. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal. He's far exceeded my expectations, even with the contract. He has lived up to the contract so far, which would have been very hard to do for him, for most players. Let's get to the defense, because I think it's tough to find the guy, but my vote would be for J.C. Horn, because I'm not going to let Alex try to just take both.
You obvious.
Yeah, J.C. Horn's been terrific. He has 17 run stops on the season and has somehow been able to play 8 games, which he's done now for the second time in his 4-year career. He's got 9 pass breakups according to ESPN, 7 according to Pro Football Focus. If you take the Pro Football Focus number, he's second in the league. If you take the ESPN number, he's fourth in the league. Doesn't matter. Either way, he's a top 5 corner when healthy. I think he's played exponentially well. He's also stepped up as a leader. Who you got, Alex?
He has stepped up as a leader. Another guy who stepped up as a leader is my guy, Trevin Wallace.
Oh,
I guess I'm wrong. Yeah, I know it's a little strange, but if you go through the Rolodex of the players who are like still healthy on this defense, I think Trevin has kind of established himself as not like someone that the Panthers can aspire to like build a team around. He got the most out of his few starts after Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson went down at the same time. He was the one calling the plays. He notched 15 tackles in his first start. Let's see, 9 against the Falcons. He also had a fumble recovery against them, 7 against the Commanders, and he only had 4 this past week, but he was the one who forced the fumble at the end of the game that prevented the Broncos from actually following through on their attempt to run up the score. He's smiley. He's magnetic. He's interesting. He in a strange way, he brings joy to this defense, and yeah. Mike had a joke ready to go for him a couple weeks ago because he's been playing so well amidst this like terribleness, but it ultimately didn't pan out. But like,
that's somebody else.
Yeah, but that's ultimately my barometer. If Mike's finding a way to work a positive joke into his reporting about this player, then he's doing something right. So give me Trevin Wallace.
Let's wrap this up. We won't talk too long about the Saints. They went from looking like a juggernaut on offense to just looking pitiful over the last 6 games. They are on a brutal meltdown stretch. And it doesn't look like things are getting any better. It seems like the Eagles figured them out in week 3 and everybody's just copying the recipe. It does sound like Derek Carr could be back this weekend. If that's the case, I think they're going to be significantly better on offense. But how significant, I don't know. I think this is a much more competitive game than it would look coming off that week 1 matchup, even with the Panthers struggling as much as they are. They haven't won a home game, or they haven't won a home game in Charlotte in like 300 days. So it's time. And they won't be back in Charlotte until after the bye week. So this is an opportunity for them. If Andy Dalton's playing, I feel a little bit more confident than I would with Bryce Young. They still have Alvin Kamara. They still have a pretty explosive passing game for the most part. Their defense plays well, although we saw, footage from last week against the Chargers where there was some dirty playing and Bradley Bozeman had to get involved. What's your outlook towards this game? Are we as a Processing Blue crew not going to pick the Panthers for this weekend?
I think if anyone is going to pick the Panthers, it would probably be me, just because I am. And to be clear, I still am holding my vote until I learn who's going to be the quarterback for the Panthers.
That feels like that's going to come down to the wire, by the way.
Yeah, it does feel like it's going to come down to the wire because both teams are searching for an identity on offense. Both teams
and also hashtag gamesmanship.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Because that works out so well. It's been such a benefit to everybody who's just had gamesmanship and kept secrets. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, if y'all couldn't tell, Mike is feeling the type of way about certain things. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to wait on who the Panthers have at quarterback before I really take a harder look on how the Saints' secondary has played the past few weeks, how their pass rush has played the past few weeks, how they've been running the ball on offense. I do know that they have not been defending the run very well. According to team rankings, they are second to last in opponent yards per rush. They are 28th in opponent rush yards per game. None of that is good. They're not a great, I mean, just a brief glance, they're also not very good in pass defense as well. But at the end of the day, like, we can look at these stats and the Panthers are just as bad. The Panthers are looking at this game the Saints are looking at this game as just as winnable as the Panthers are, I feel like. So I'm going to stay away from a prediction this time. But at least this is like going to be an interesting, winnable game for both teams. I think both of them I think both of these fan bases need that at this point in the year. And maybe the Panthers can deliver some fun in Bank of America Stadium. I don't know, man. I feel like I've been kind of a downer this podcast, even though we have dressed up and stuff. I just like I don't really know what to say. Like,
well, I know what you should do. I got the solution.
Okay.
You should do the outro with the nose on.
I'll try, but then I might laugh at myself and the nose will fall off.
Well, that's endearing, but do it anyway.
Okay. All right.
Let's send him home, kids.
Okay. Here we go. All right. I'm going to sound so nasally, too. All right. Thanks, as always, for listening to our thoughts and prayers on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer.
Your thoughts and prayers?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was going to be funny. Anyway, please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
It ain't easy being green, but that's a wrap.